So welcome everyone. Welcome to this latest webinar in our virtual conference about making data good for society. Before I introduce the speaker, just a very quick introduction to myself and what's going on. So I'm Julian Schwarzenbach. I'm chair of the BCS Data Management Specialist Group. This webinar and the series of webinars this week have been organised jointly by the Data Management Specialist Group and DAMA UK. BCS is the professional body for computing with a mission to make IT better for society. And it was that slogan, strapline, which actually gave us the prompt for what we might use the theme for this conference this year of making data good for society. The Data Management Specialist Group, we promote better use of data by both running a number of data-related events throughout the year and also supporting development of data-related standards and guidance. DAMA UK is the go-to organisation for data professionals in the UK with a mission to nurture a community of data professionals who champion the value of data management. And this is a number of events during the week at 11 o'clock and 4 o'clock each day, just to try and pace them out and just sort of deal with people's stamina for Zoom meetings a little bit. But what you've got on screen at the moment is, if you like, a visual agenda. So starting on the left-hand side in the red, on Monday we had the National Data Strategy and the NHS Dudley Group trusts. On Blue Day was Tuesday, which was Open Data Institute and the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. This morning we had the Environment Agency. We've now got Mark Enzer with the Data for the Public Good and the Digital Twin. Tomorrow we're starting with Catherine O'Keefe on data ethics, and then we've got the National Physical Laboratory talking about data science and measurement. And then also talking data science on Friday morning, we've got Nick Soros from DataKind. And then we're ending the week on Friday afternoon at 4 with a panel debate. The graphics that were generated there will be created by Journalism, and they're actually been live annotating all our events this week. So we've got Alex from Journalism here at the moment, and when Mark has finished doing his presentation, we'll quickly go through the work that Alex has done today, and we'll then be sharing these back with delegates later in the week anyway. Let's just remember the next bit. Yep, and throughout the conference, there's actually managed to arrange for a discount in the BCS bookshop. So for data-related titles, there's 30% off list prices if you use the discount code of BCS Data, and it's valid throughout this week. The URL for getting to the shop is there at shop.bcs.org, and most of the books that are covered in this offer are there. And you'll see that Tim King and I are both online, and that's our book at the bottom there. Quick plug there. We'll probably get away with that, but there are plenty of other good data-related titles there that you can make the benefit of. For those who've already been attending other sessions this week, apologies that whilst I put this slide up before, I've not actually provided the discount code before today. So you now have the discount code provided this time, which does make life a little bit easier. So before we get into the presentation itself, just a few bits of housekeeping. We're actually recording the event. It will be topped and tailed, and it will appear on the BCS member group's YouTube channel. It will also appear on the DAMA website after we've done that. I mentioned about Journalism, so the outputs from Journalism, they were circulated later. We're all muted, and what we'll be encouraging you to do is ask questions in the chat section on Zoom, and I will ask them to Mark on your behalf. So we've got about 20 minutes for questions at the end. So by all means, put in questions in the chat, either throughout the presentation or when we get to the Q&A session, we can do that. I'd now like to welcome Mark, our speaker for today. He's is a very keen champion of innovation and working in the built environment. Mark is Mark McDonald's Chief Technical Officer and is also the chair of CDBB, the Centre for Digital Built Britain's Digital Framework Task Groups. That's lots of words, lots of letters in the same point there. But Mark is also contributing to the National Digital Twin programme, and that therefore gives some of the content of today is going to be what Mark's work and Mark's views on that. Mark was also digital transformation workstream lead on Project 13 for the infrastructure client group. And I think Mark might explain a little bit more about that, but he's been involved in quite a few high profile strategic data related initiatives in a variety of contexts. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Mark. Over to you, Mark.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julian, and thank you very much for inviting me to share with you today. And the subject that you gave me was data for the public good and the National Digital Twin Programme. So it's like two for the price of one, but thankfully they're very nicely connected. And I think that in many ways what we are talking about here is a data infrastructure that will unleash the information economy. Now, I know that sounds like buzzwords. It is buzzwords, and maybe we can dig into that in the questions and answers, because I suspect that you're not going to let me get away with anything, and nor should you. So the way that I was hoping to do this was start off by looking at data for public good, and in particular the actual report called that came from the National Infrastructure Commission, and that kicked off the whole idea of the National Digital Twin. Then take a little bit of a step back, talk about digital twins themselves, just in the round in general. You know, what is a digital twin? What does it look like? What, maybe a little bit of what it isn't as well. And then take a bigger step back to look at the big picture of the built environment, because this is the context of the National Digital Twin Programme. And then having done that context, I'll dig into the National Digital Twin itself, which hopefully will make more sense once that context is set. So that's the journey. Let's start off with the Data for the Public Good report. Now, this came out 3 and a bit years ago. I'm imagining that quite a few people on the call have seen it. If you haven't, I would recommend it to you. It's, I think, a seminal report. It's come out from the National Infrastructure Commission, and it's visionary. It's fantastic. It looks forward a long way to see the kind of thing that we need to do to use data for the public good. There's quite a bit of focus on infrastructure data, and that's what the National Infrastructure Commission does. But I think it's an important distinction to make. So really, the zone that we're in here is talking about getting value from infrastructure, systems, and assets data. So we're not in the zone of talking about personal data. But it is very much about public good. That's the whole driver of it. And as I hope I'll explain, it's become the driver of the National Digital Twin Programme itself and has informed the values all the way through. So the recommendations that came from the Data for Public Good report, really at a high level, and there were loads of recommendations, and like I say, go and have a look. But the high level recommendations were that we should move towards having a national digital twin. I'll dig into that later, like I said, explain what that is, but just to kind of get rid of any misconceptions right at the beginning, we're not talking about one massive digital twin of everything. We're talking about an ecosystem of connected digital twins. I'll explain all of that later. The second thing that they recommended was that we should establish an information management framework to enable that national digital twin, which is really all about enabling secure, resilient data sharing across organisational and sector boundaries. And that is seen as a key enabler of the national digital twin. The third recommendation was that we should bring together people from across government and industry and academia to pull in the same direction, to collaborate and work together in pursuance of this shared information management framework, which is almost like a digital commons that then enables the National Digital Twin. And when it comes to our work on the programme, really that is to deliver that information management framework and enable the National Digital Twin. Now, it's an important distinction I'm making here, because the National Digital Twin Programme is not going to go and build the National Digital Twin. The idea is that that's what the market does. But the market won't just do it by itself. What we see is that in the absence of some support and some collaboration, the market would fragment. Loads of digital twins will be produced, but there won't be interoperability, and we'll effectively create a kind of a friction that mitigates against data sharing across organisational boundaries. So we kind of need to do that enabling, deliver the information management framework, enable the National Digital Twin. But what we're trying to do is encourage a vibrant market with low barrier to entry, enabling all sorts of players to contribute one way or the other to the National Digital Twin. Okay, so I've made a few distinctions there already just to kind of show where we're going on that. I think one of the things which for me is really important in this whole program is about the values that are guiding us. I said that the Data for Public Good report itself kind of set the tone for that. You know, it's very much about public good. And so one of the first things which we produced on the program was this, the Gemini principles, and I'd commend these to you as well. And so it means that the whole program is driven by values, because we see that it would be possible to use the various different technologies which are encompassed in this for good or ill, and we want them to be used for good. Data for the public good. And so that means it really feels like it needs to be guided by values. And we've highlighted those values under 3 headings of purpose, trust, and function. I think you'll hear a lot more about purpose as we run through this, because I think purpose ends up defining an awful lot of what is needed in each individual digital twin. It should be guided by purpose. But if the digital twins are not trusted, then they're not going to be used. So the whole trust point is massively important. And you'll see kind of right at the center of that is an interesting potential tension between security and openness. And what we're saying is actually, it's not a choice. It's not one or the other. We want both. We're greedy. And digital twins and the National Digital Twin must be secure, and they must enable security. That's one requirement, but also it should be as open as possible. And so, there's a balance to be struck, but that's a healthy balance that we need to basically constantly attend to. And in the National Digital Twin Programme, we are doing our very utmost to be security minded from the foundation upwards. So, I'm sure there will be questions about that. So, data for public good, driven by values. That's a kind of a key starting point for the whole thing. Let's now talk a little bit about digital twins and what they are. And again, I'm sure that people around the call will be very familiar with this, so forgive me to kind of go right back to some basics. But I think the starting point is that we're all very familiar with the physical, but increasingly it's possible to have digital twins. So fundamentally a digital representation of something that's physical. But what makes it a digital twin, and this ends up being kind of important in most of the definitions which are coming out now, is the data connection, a coupling between the physical and the digital. And it's that data flow from the physical to the digital that makes it actually a digital twin worth having. Now, what lots of people will say is that it needs to be a real-time data flow. What we see in the built environment is that it might be better to talk about it being right time, and that the refresh rate of the data should be driven by the purpose of the twin. Because real-time data flows cost money, and if you've got kind of a millisecond refresh rate, it isn't always worth it, particularly if, for example, your digital twin is of a system and what you want to use it for is planning. You don't need real-time refresh rates, but the dynamic data connection between the model and the thing that's being modeled, that is key. And when we have got the data flowing one way, then we can generate insights that help to make better decisions. And those decisions can drive better interventions back in the physical world, hopefully driving good outcomes. And in this example that I've obviously got on the slide of Formula One, which seems to be familiar to, it's a very accessible example, is that in Formula One, there are digital twins of the cars. As the cars are buzzing around the track, the digital twin is taking in all the data, helping to make decisions as to when to bring the car in for a tyre change, helping to analyse the driver behaviour and performance and all of this wonderful stuff. So helping to make operational decisions right there and then. But also, there's a digital twin that can be put in a digital wind tunnel which can then help to make a different type of decision, which is the decision for what modifications will be made to the car for 2 weeks' time when it's at a different altitude and the air is thinner. And so we can see, even in this example, different types of digital twins for different purposes. And it's exactly the same when we start to apply digital twin thinking in the built environment. But I think what we see here really is an information value chain. And I really do hesitate to show you such a ridiculously, stupidly simple diagram in this particular audience, so forgive me. However, what we find is that it's really valuable for other audiences to help them to understand how value can be increased to data. You bring data in from the world, from all sorts of different sources, and we know that we could use sensors or satellite data or the Twitter fire hose or something coming from cameras. It doesn't matter, it's data. Generally, we have to do something with the data to make it fit for use, but it's still data. And then when we, and the data that's fit for use, the data that's been cleansed and data which is, had some work put into it, is of a higher value than what it started off at. It's already moving up a value chain, but then it has even more value when we've started to make sense of it and understood what the meaning is, and what does it tell us, and when we generate insights, which comes from our modeling or our big data analysis or whatever it is that we're doing to make sense of it and generate insights. And then those insights are used to make the decisions. And then the decisions drive the interventions, and the interventions lead to the outcomes. So what we have is this connection all the way through from data to outcomes. And it should really be the outcomes that we're trying to drive. But the key thing is, and this is the point that we kind of emphasize in other audiences, is that the thing that releases the value is making better decisions. Making better decisions faster, and in brackets cheaper, is the release of value. Information and the information flow kind of carries the value. It's the value carrier, but it's making better decisions releases the value. And that, I think, is key to the purpose of an awful lot of digital twins. And I said we were going to bang the purpose word a few times in this. So now let's generalize what we have with digital twins. You've got the physical world, you've got the digital world, you've got data going one way, you've got interventions going the other. We think you can have digital twins of assets and processes and systems. So already we're starting to talk about lots of different types of digital twins, and it doesn't always have to look that physical. So for example, a digital twin of a process is it's still a digital twin. When it comes to what sits inside the digital twin, there's always something to do with managing the data. There's usually something to do with doing something clever with it, some kind of model code core going on to generate the insight. And then usually something to do with visualization to help humans have a window into what's going on in the digital twin, to let humans know what's happening. And sometimes that's essential so that humans can make the decision. But it's possible to have a digital twin with a human in the loop or a human out of the loop. And it might be possible to have a human in the loop in various different points. That is not about the definition of the digital twin. And what we start to like to do is have a rich way of describing digital twins rather than just having an all-encompassing definition, because there are so many different types for so many different purposes. But there is this kind of core of it that is consistent. In other words, the dynamic data connection between the digital and the physical. And the other thing which seems to be core is making better decisions. And so that's where we see the value coming from. And then, as I've said before, we see that the whole thing should be driven by values, and most particularly purpose, trust, and function. So that's generalized it. Let's now look at the built environment. So where we're at now is that we know that we want to do this for good. We want to use data for public good. We want to be driven by values. We know what a digital twin is. Now what we're looking at is the scope. What is the national digital twin about? And the scope of it really is the whole of the built environment. So that's our economic infrastructure, so energy, transport, water, telecoms, and waste. our social infrastructure, so what are hospitals, prisons, schools, residential buildings, commercial buildings, industrial buildings, but also the interface with the natural environment. If you add all of that together, you get our built environment, this amazing thing that we've been building for centuries. We've been kind of connecting it together, and it's kind of almost like a huge organism that we live within, but it's complex and it's interconnected, and it is a system of systems. You know, we've made it that way, and I think sometimes we need to kind of open our eyes and see it that way and manage it as a system of systems. So there's two things that I want to do with this slide. First one is say this is the scope, the current scope of the National Digital Twin Programme, but also let's notice the system, because the digital twins we're talking about in the National Digital Twin Programme are systems tools to help solve systems problems. And let's face it, we've got some pretty big systemic problems just now. I think quintessentially, if you look at climate change, that's a systemic challenge that demands systems-based solutions. You can't solve it in silos. You need to have information sharing across those silos to break the silos and make better decisions. And those better decisions will take us towards net zero, but also better resilience decisions and better circular economy decisions later on. So systems, we're thinking systems here. So if we see the built environment as a system of systems, then we can see that it can deliver all sorts of desirable outcomes. And I said earlier on, you know, it's all about outcomes. And the outcomes at the highest level, I guess, that we're aiming for here are the SDGs. But you can see aligned outcomes all the way through from those high level kind of global outcomes that are desirable down through to local outcomes for local projects or local improvements on infrastructure, or indeed local use of infrastructure. So it's all about outcomes. And that's why I put this slide up. It's kind of saying that outcomes are the starting point of all of this, but also the end point. Okay, so now that we are thinking in terms of systems, because we all hopefully agree that the built environment is a system of systems, what are the processes in those systems that actually deliver the services that we benefit from? And I think at the center of it all is the use. That's the whole point of the built environment. We built it to be used, we live in it, and for us to thrive, for people to have well-being, then it needs to work. So the most important process really is the use of it. To make the built environment available for use, we need to operate and maintain it. And then every now and again, we need new assets into the built environment. And so we plan, we design, we build, we commission. But I think important to point out here that we're not just talking about construction. Construction is massively important. It's something like 9% of GDP. It's huge. However, if we look at our overall built environment, we've got something like 99.5% of what we need already. And then each year we add something like 0.5% to it. And obviously that adds up over 10 years. I mean, it becomes an appreciable percentage. It's important. But so is the 99.5. And so really we need an approach that addresses the 100%. And then if we see the system, then we can start to see the cyber physical system. Now, this kind of language is very familiar in Industry 4.0. It's the kind of thing which is, it's happening in practice in advanced manufacturing. This is not new to humanity, but the language of cyber physical systems is kind of new to the built environment. But it's doable. And the whole idea here is that we bring the digital world, the physical world together. We do this whole thing about releasing value by making better decisions. But I don't think we can begin to see the cyber physical system if we haven't first seen the system. And then we need competent system tools to help us make better decisions at a system level. I actually do need to just bounce back up to the previous slide on these processes that I was talking about earlier on. If we're looking for where digital twins might be useful, the kind of purposes that would unlock all this value, then I think just having a look at these processes on this diagram gives a clue. You know, it's making better use decisions, better operation decisions, better planning decisions, better design decisions. You get the point. So really, we can imagine digital twins being used throughout the system and throughout the life cycle of the individual assets. And important to see the distinction between the system and the assets. So that was my kind of background. It all then leads to this kind of big, bold vision of Digital Built Britain, which can be described in the 4 words of design, build, operate, and integrate. And I think that if we kind of notionally see where we've got to in terms of information management across those areas, we can probably say we've made a pretty good start in design and build, actually a very good start. The work that has been done in building information modelling has unlocked massive value across the industry. But there's more to go. Yeah, we're not finished on that journey. We're well on it, but we're not finished. When it comes to thinking about how we can unlock the value of better information management across operation, and then across integration, by which we mean integrating across all those processes, integrating across different sectors, then we're really just at the beginning. Now, in some ways, that could be a little bit depressing. Think, oh, we're just at the beginning. However, it also points towards a massive opportunity. Okay, so I've done my big step back. That's the kind of the background into which steps the National Digital Twin as tools that can help us in making these better decisions through all those processes throughout the built environment. Now, we already know what a generalized digital twin looks like, and we can draw that same picture pretty much for anything we want to in the built environment. This just happens to be a train, but it's the same thing. Data connection, generate insights, make better decisions, drive better interventions. That's great. But we can also imagine that there would be digital twins of the of the track and of the signaling. As I said, many different purposes. But then it makes sense, doesn't it, to make the connection between them. And the connection between digital twins is just data sharing. So if we start to think about connected digital twins, what we're really talking about is data sharing. And then we can zoom out and make the same kind of point across different digital twins used in different parts of transport. So joining together digital twins used in road and rail and air. Same point though, how we connect them is secure, resilient data sharing. We can zoom out again, make the same point at a sector level, where you can imagine really useful digital twins in each of the individual sectors for individual purposes within the sectors, but then also this data sharing across sector boundaries to enable even higher level decisions. And so what we get to is this ecosystem of connected digital twins. And the thing that enables it is secure, resilient information sharing across organisational and sector boundaries. Now that's a good idea. The issue is, and I touched on this earlier, is that if we just leave it to the market, what the market will do is go and build loads of digital twins, which they are already. It's already happening. This is a very vibrant market. But when it comes to connecting the digital twins, there's a real danger that everyone does it in their own way. It's a really easy thing to do, write an API, make a connection. The trouble is, if you make one bespoke connection and then another bespoke connection, they're all bespoke, then you end up with an n-squared nightmare, where every connection is kind of done in a bespoke kind of way, but different to the others. And hence it builds friction into the system. So what we need much more is some kind of coordination, something that brings a kind of a principled approach to that data sharing, something that is shared, something that creates that interoperability between the various different digital twins. And so you can kind of in some ways liken it to an infrastructure, just the same as a kind of a water network. And Matthew West, who I guess is known to many people on the call, uses the great analogy of saying that this is like a kind of a clean water network, where what you've got to do to make sure that when you open a tap and clean water comes out, you've got to put clean water in. So what it comes down to, yes, it's data quality. And so what we need to be able to do is make sure that the data that goes into this infrastructure is of a determined quality. And if we just take a little kind of cross-section through this pipeline, what that effectively is a picture of the National Digital Twin, what it looks like. I'm not going to spend long on this next slide because it's a bit scary, but I do just want to show you briefly kind of what it consists of if we look at a cross-section through that pipe. What we see are the kind of asset owners submitting, publishing data into the National Digital Twin or into the pipeline, following certain rules, and then people getting access to the data using protocols which are shared. So if we summarize what that information management framework is, that the thing that enables this secure, resilient data sharing, we think that it really comes down to something quite simple, just three things at a high level from a technical point of view. There's the foundation data model, which is all to do with having a consistent approach to data modeling, consistent and shared approach. The reference data library, which is all about having shared reference data rather than everyone having their own and it being different and always having to put in some translation. We think it's also about establishing that integration architecture and the protocols to make sure that only the right people get access to the right data. But those three things are what we see as being the technical core of the information management framework, and that's kind of a key enabler of the whole thing. This year on our program, we've got three really interesting components to the program. The first one is the continuation of that work on the information management framework. Some really solid work being done there, and hopefully you've seen some of it. Be really happy to kind of share the link so that you can have a look around. In all of the areas that I mentioned just now, really good progress is being made. Then there's the DT Hub, which is the Digital Twin Hub. This is our means of concentrating the market. It's a collaborative community of people who are interested in digital twins. It brings together those who will be buying digital twins, but also those who sell products and services into the digital twin market. What we have to do really in this whole thing is encourage the development of individual digital twins and then also encourage that connection between them. So having the community working together is brilliant. So that DT Hub now has 1,000 separate organisations which are members and more than 1,700 individual members. And then the third part of it, which is not quite ready for us to kind of announce and dig into in any detail, but we're hoping to put together a demonstrator so that people can see what we actually mean by a national digital twin. Because what we keep on getting, and it's good feedback, is that it's all very well to describe the national digital twin in kind of high-level conceptual terms, but kind of show us what it really means, give us an example. And I think that having a demonstrator which is all about climate resilience, all about making better decisions, better climate resilience decisions, which are enabled by cross-sector information sharing, that would be a great example if we can just make it work. So that was a very quick scoot through. Hopefully that's given you a good picture as to why all of this came about, why it's such a driver for us on the data of the public good point, what the National Digital Twin is, and a little bit about what we're doing to deliver it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. That was really good, really excellent. Thank you very much. Alex, are you ready to share? Because what we're going to do now is, if you can post any questions for Mark in the chat. Before we get there, what I'm going to do is we're going to share the work that Alex has been doing to create a visual record of the event, if I can get the sharing done right. So that's good. So we focus on Alex. So just talking you through this very quickly, it's going through from the left-hand side, the idea about data for the public good, the national digital twin, enabling, delivering, a very strong focus on values, about the interventions and decisions, the analogy to Formula One, and then going through about the value chain. I think the key point that Mark made, which I think is one well worth remembering, is that it's the decision making that actually is where the value is released by the approach. thinking about the cycle, thinking about how the digital twins all work together. And you can see here that it's actually growing as we're talking, but that gives us another nice view there, and the fact that this is actually a pathway, this is a journey that we're all on collectively. So that's really just giving a quick view of the work that Alex has done so far. There'll be a bit more tidying up of that, and we'll be sharing these outputs later with people. And also, in fact, Alex is going to be annotating the Q&A session when we get through to that. So that's really useful. So thank you, Alex, for that. And hopefully that will give Mark a few thoughts there, which are going to be really good. I'm just trying to get the spotlighting done right, so we can get the right people in here. The spotlight, that's good. So like I said earlier, if you can add your questions in the chat, that'll be really, really useful. We've already got a few coming in so far, but just to start off with, one that would be just an interesting question, interesting area to explore, Mark, would be, in some ways, digital twins has become a bit of a buzz phrase, not quite like cryptocurrency, Internet of Things and big data, but I'm hearing, and I'm sure you are, the term digital twins referred to in ever wider contexts. There's more standards work around digital twins. So is that greater awareness, is that an advantage, or is that perhaps a hindrance?
Yeah, I think in a weird way, it's both of those things, because I think the advantage side of the coin is that it is creating some kind of buzz. But I agree with you, if people are just using it as buzzwords, but not kind of digging into what it means, or more importantly, what value might be got from it, then it might not be so helpful. Certainly what we see is a massive increase in interest in digital twins across the board, across many sectors. But I don't think that the kind of description and definitions has really stabilized yet. I picked up on a few of the points in the talk, didn't I, around whether it's real time or right time and those kind of things. There's still discussions going on. And a lot of people, for example, are describing digital twins as a technology, whereas I think we probably see it as a means of connecting all sorts of technologies. So for example, IoT would be part of it, and AI and ML and all the visualization kind of stuff. And of course, we've got to mention blockchain too. So I don't think it's right to be describing digital twins just as a technology. And therefore, I think my kind of overall feeling on this buzzword thing is it's probably more useful than not useful, but we kind of need to help the market to stabilize on what they mean.
Yeah, I think it's interesting your point there about the technology argument, and based on Karen Alford's presentation this morning from the Environment Agency, they were showing very clearly how building up from solid foundations around data, they're actually now starting to leverage real advantage there. And I guess it's a similar approach with digital twins, is you've got to get the technology, get the data and the fundamental foundations right before applying too much technology.
Yes, absolutely. Something else actually which occurs to me as you're talking, and how useful it is to have people talk about digital twins, is that we do find that there are definitely different levels of understanding. And if, for example, we go and explain what a digital twin is, and what we start with is talking about data quality and secure, resilient data sharing across organisational sector. You can already hear there's a certain class of person has fallen asleep before I've even finished that particular sentence.
Yeah.
And if we lead on what it actually is, on kind of what's under the bonnet, nobody listens. And so with that kind of community, it's actually much better to talk about the shiny stuff and digital twins and connected digital twins, or even less than that, is talking about digital twins that can talk to each other. And that kind of language works with a certain community, but it really does not work with a technical community, because it just sounds like fluff. So what we find really is that we need to be able to talk in both terms. Yeah,
interesting. I think it's the age-old one of trying to make what could be viewed as a dull subject an interesting one around data. Anyway, question, I think it's a really interesting, useful question coming from Martin Newman, which I'm just going to add a little bit to. So his comment, well, question really is, he comes from a heritage perspective, And he's just curious to know where the historic environment fits into the model, where it's sort of environmental or social. And I think I'd add on to that, recognizing that digitizing assets comes at a cost. The benefit comes later. Now, clearly, if you're doing a new construction project, you get the lowest cost of creating the data and you get the benefits rather immediately. What are your thoughts there about both the heritage environment, but also the legacy environment, about how we can more pragmatically approach getting some digital twins in that space?
Yeah, it's a lovely question, isn't it? And actually, a completely new question. And I've been asked lots of questions before, but this is the first time this one's come up. It's great.
Thank you, Martin.
So I think that I would revert back to one of my kind of stock points on this, which is it's all about purpose. And I think that if we can see a clear purpose for a kind of a heritage digital twin, then yes, we should do it. If it's just because it's fun or because we can, then we probably shouldn't. And I can imagine all sorts of potential purposes for heritage digital twins, and usually the clue is, what decisions do we want to make better? Where could better informed decisions help us to deliver better outcomes? And so I can imagine actually around a whole load of heritage type assets that there would be decisions that would be improved. I'm just going to throw stuff out there from my own personal interaction with heritage sites. Is how you enable people to interact with a site. Where does the footpath go? What damage might that footpath do to what's under the ground, or what you don't even know is underground? One can imagine that there will be decisions that will be improved by having digital twins of heritage. So I think yes, but it should be driven by purpose rather than just because it's fun.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, Martin, we normally don't unmute people. I might actually look at trying to, if I can get Martin unmuted, if I can find him on the thing, because he wanted to actually just clarify what he meant by heritage, or say what he's thought about heritage data. So I've put a question there. Martin, do you want to just quickly pose or explain your viewpoint there?
Yes. Well, basically where I'm coming from is point of view of heritage, particularly being used in the planning system. I'm responsible for all of the data on the national record, on the National Heritage List for England, which includes listed buildings, scheduled monuments, etc., which are an essential part of the planning system. Now, that could be everything from buried archaeology to listed buildings. So I can clearly see a role in there, and as you said, a definite purpose for heritage data feeding into the digital twin. But I was just thinking, how could we ensure that is done? And also, because it's going to have to fit in with other things like the government's digital planning agenda. And how do we make all of that connect up? And how can we contribute? And actually, your presentation just blown my mind in a number of ways. And yeah, it's very, very thought-provoking. But heritage is there as part of public good, which also feeds back into what you were saying right at the beginning.
Yeah, good. I hope that the mind blowing is in a good way. I hope that's a pleasant thing.
But I think actually that one question from Glenn, or a comment there from Glenn, is related to that. Is that he's basically commenting that the National Digital Twin is conceptually huge, and just thinking about it could be a lifetime's career. And I know there are a lot of academics at Cambridge who are doing quite a bit of work in this space. So how do we actually make sure the benefits are kind of timetabled and assured, and we've got that balance between the academic conceptual and the pragmatic and real, and that we're actually delivering real tangible benefits at different points? Yeah,
another brilliant question. I mean, I think it's right that you can imagine that in some ways the National Digital Twin could be so huge that it's never finished. It's when would you ever say it was finished? Which then can make us ask the question, so when is it counted as being started? And I think that seeing the National Digital Twin as an ecosystem of connected digital twins and being driven by purpose means that we only develop digital twins if there's a purpose for the digital twin. then we only connect them if there's a purpose for the connection. And so what you can then imagine is this ecosystem being built one purpose at a time. And basically, as soon as any of them are connected, you can say, hey, look, we've got a national digital twin. It might only be a thin slice, but it's the beginning. And then each new connection into it is, like I say, one purpose at a time. So I think when it's seen that way, it suddenly feels much more manageable because it's not being done in a top-down kind of way. It's being done in a purposeful way, where it makes meaning. And really, all we're doing is providing the enabling of that, so that the market can do what makes sense. So for me, that's a real key answer, that it stops then being an academic exercise and starts being a market-driven one. But in order for it to be market-driven, the market needs to be enabled.
Yeah, and I guess also there's probably something about trying to make sure that the decision makers in organizations aren't viewing this as hearing a salesperson saying, we can create this wonderful digital twin of your physical assets, look at all the things we can do, laser surveys, LiDAR, etc., and instead turn it around to the C-suite, the leaders of the organization, saying, going back to Martin's point about planning, we need to have better information about planning. How can we get better feeds of digital information to actually support the planning process? So we probably need some sound bites and some key messages for that very niche audience of the C-suite and the decision makers.
Yes, I agree. And just remembering another part of the question was about the kind of the benefits realization, because I think that even if we have that approach that I said around developing it one purpose at a time, we still need to be very clear on the benefits realization. And if the whole point of this is to deliver better outcomes, what we really need is a kind of a proper logic model that goes all the way through to outcomes. Are we actually improving outcomes? Another key question to ask somewhere in the logic model is, are we improving the performance of our infrastructure? At the moment, we don't even know what the performance of our infrastructure is. But just being able to say what the performance is would be one good benefit out of the National Digital Twin. But what I think we need is a competent benefits realization model that does pick up on that full logic all the way through to outcomes.
Yeah, we had a cracking question come through from George Rory, which I think will open up another interesting area to explore of who would you see as owning the National Digital Twin and providing guidance around rules or what sort of data is included, how it should be accessed, what's the governance and ownership model? And if it goes great, I'm sure everybody will claim credit. And if it goes wrong, they'll all be running for the hills to say, oh, it was somebody else, not me. So what are your thoughts around ownership and responsibility?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, it in some ways relates all the way down to ownership of data, doesn't it? But when we talk at the high level of the ownership of the National Digital Twin, there is something kind of important about it being owned by nobody, used by everybody. There is an element of that, and I think that when we talk about enabling the market, then the information management framework at the core of that, but that there will be other kind of rules of the game that need to be shared, and we think that then there's need to be kind of soft frameworks and standards just as well as the hard frameworks and standards. So that bit that is shared between all of us that enables the market, you could call it a digital commons. That's a key thing that needs to be shared, and therefore it mustn't be proprietary. It needs to be owned on our behalf. It makes sense to me that is the kind of thing that government feeds into. It's like a key purpose of government. But you can see actually most of the investment happening down below that in the market itself. And an expression that we use, which I think helps to illustrate this, is about collaborating on the rules and competing on the game. And we think that in the same way you say, who owns football? Well, nobody owns football, but it's for all of us. However, there is somebody who's looking after the rules, and it feels quite similar to me on this. And if we can just get ourselves to collaborate on the rules so that we end up with something that is shared, we avoid that market failure that I described as an n-squared nightmare, then we can imagine something that is really good for us. So that would be my answer. Collaborate on the rules, compete on the game. Who owns football?
That's brilliant soundbite, that one. I like that one. Yes, and it actually feeds in neatly as well to a question from Paul Wallace, which was thinking about the accuracy of this and understanding interventions. About what's the need around change control, and is there a need for the government to have a step in, or being part of the comms agenda about change control, about how digital twins are used and exploited?
Yes, I think yes. And I think that there's something around that kind of change control, which is actually also data. It ends up being data about data, and data about what the data was before, and data about what the data is next. So I think the answer to that is basically yes. Change control will be really important. I'm tempted to move on to a different change point, but it might be that my leap would be too great, Julian, because one of the things which I was keen to just talk about a bit is how in some ways we can see the whole program being a change program, a socio-technical change program. But I think the question was down at a different level, and so maybe it'd be unfair for me to make that leap.
But actually, I think it probably is fair to make that leap, because I think it is two aspects. There are people who can do their bit at the lower level, working within that framework that's been set up, but also there's the need to define the framework and the overall direction of travel, and making sure the enablers are in place, the blockers have been removed, so people understand where things are going. So that higher level drive is really key. Which of course also leads into, and just thinking, we had Phil Earle from the DCMS earlier this week talking about the national data strategy. And how do you think, what do you see as the links between the two? And did you feed into the national data strategy?
Yes. So with your permission then, Julian, I'll jump onto the socio-technical change program. So yes, we did feed into that, and that there's a little box in there which talks specifically about the National Digital Twin program. I think it's really interesting to see that kind of bigger picture of data, because I talked earlier, I made the distinction between the kind of the personal data, where what we need to do is protect it, and the asset and systems data, where we need to kind of release the value of it, and how they're different, but they both need to be part of a national data strategy. So it was yes to that. When it comes to the overall change, we think that the National Digital Twin Programme is a socio-technical change programme, because I've focused quite a bit in the presentation on the technical solution. But if all we have is a brilliant technical solution and it doesn't get adopted, then it's useless. The adoption of it is at least as important as the development of it. And going back to my rules and game thing, if you've got brilliant rules but nobody plays the game, it's not much of a game. So what we need really is both the development and the adoption of this. And I think it's really interesting to see how you might see industry-wide adoption, and what kind of change would be required. And we think that probably needs to happen at a number of different levels. So there's something at an individual level, where each of us need to go through some kind of change journey. You upskilling, whether that's in the boardroom or on graduate courses, etc. But there's something about individuals and how we interact with digital twins. There's also something at an organizational level, where each organization needs to kind of go through an increase in information management maturity. And we can imagine that would be true pretty much for every organization. They'll all be in different places on the maturity curve, but they all kind of need to move up it a bit. So let's define what that curve is. What does information management maturity mean? How do we describe it? How do you move up the curve? Every organization needs to do that. And then we can see at a sector level that there's cross-organization things that need to work together, and it probably is within sectors. You can see it happening within energy or within water, and regulation would come into that, just ensuring that customers really did get the value, and so that's kind of cross-organizational stuff. And then another level up, kind of at a national level, where you start to see the same thing across sectors. Now, I've concentrated an awful lot on the built environment because that's the scope of the National Digital Twin Programme. But everything I've said kind of makes sense in other sectors too. You kind of think, well, wouldn't that apply to food and farming? Wouldn't it apply to advanced manufacturing? And doesn't it apply also in healthcare? And you can keep going and think, actually, this thinking is relevant across all sectors. And so wouldn't it be great if we could unlock the value in a multi-sectoral kind of way? And so I think that's something which is really worth considering. Don't just constrain it to the built environment. And by the way, just a little bit of built environment humility here. We do need to recognise that our colleagues across in advanced manufacturing have been doing this a lot longer than we have, and have been doing it a lot better than we have. So actually, we can learn from them. But there might be something that they can learn from us too. So why don't we have kind of an integrated collaborative program that brings it together? That's what I think would be great.
Yeah. There was also an interesting question, I think goes back to the point you were making earlier about the tension between openness and security. And, you and I could debate this one for ages, but just interesting, a question from Humana, not sure if that's the full name or just their pseudonym, but interested in terms of the general public and the citizen science communities of what they can do, both an input to build the digital twin world, but also maybe get further benefits out of digital twins.
Yes, it's an absolutely brilliant question. And actually, I think it goes to the heart of this trust thing, because we in the technical world can think, oh, we can imagine something brilliant here and everyone's going to love it. But they might not. And so I don't think this is the kind of thing that we can just go and build in a shed and one day open the doors and expect everyone to love it. And particularly since it's to do with digital and data and people get worried about that. So I think that the whole interface with the public on the National Digital Twin is enormously important. If it is going to genuinely be used, data for the public good, then the public kind of have to be involved in it, and it has to be good for the public. So I think that Humana's question, I'm sure that it's not his real name. Humana's question is really important, and if I can just kind of point back to the Gemini principles, that thing in the middle about trust. Is that if the National Digital Twin is not trusted, then it doesn't work. We have to build trust. So it has to be secure, it has to be open, and it has to be built on quality.
Yeah, definitely so. And just we're sort of running out of time now, because it's been fascinating discussion so far. Just one bit that I think I'm going to end with a question before we very quickly show Alex's view of the Q&A. When we think about asset management and the development of ISO 55000, arguably the UK was one of the leading nations to help develop that standard. Similarly, in terms of BIM and ISO 19650 family, the UK was very much one of the leading nations to drive some of the standard development forward. Where do we rank in the world ranking, if you like, about digital twins and the thinking behind them? Are we in the lead, or are we playing catch up to somebody else?
Wow, your audience does ask fantastic questions. It's a mixed answer to that. I think when it comes to digital twins, that there's an immense amount of activity all over the place. And I think that there's a distinction actually between how advanced we are in digital twinning and how advanced we are in connecting digital twins. Now, clearly the National Digital Twin Programme is kind of focused on the connections between digital twins. And I think it's fair to say that internationally, we're kind of at the front of that. There's an awful lot of people who are very interested in what we're doing, and we want to collaborate. This is something that does need to be shared. But it's not something that we have some kind of secure lead that we can't lose. Like I say, there's an immense amount of activity in this area, and we see a number of other nations now who are talking about developing national digital twins. So that includes New Zealand, Holland, Sweden. So there's more and more in the race. We would like to be kind of a positive collaborative partner at the front end of that, but it's not guaranteed. We could easily not be there if we don't get this right.
But a lot of it is down to intellectual capital and the people and the brains and the knowledge that once we've got it, if we can keep it, that'll be really good. So yeah, Good. Okay, we're about out of time, so thank you, Mark. So before we do that, what I'll just very quickly do is Alex has been busy annotating the Q&A sessions. So just a quick illustration there, what Alex has been doing. So collaborate on the rules, compete on the game. So we've actually now got a visual of that soundbite, Mark, which is really good. This bit's huge. We'll have to build it one bit at a time. It's not just a buzzword. Information management maturity, the public's got to be involved. So, and also the question from Martin, which is a brilliant one. He and I probably could have quite a long conversation around this, but it's also about heritage sites as well, about thinking about that is also part of this built environment we're working in. So we'll close on that visual summary there, but on behalf of everybody, Mark, I'd like to thank you for that, both very good presentation and the very engaging Q&A session we've had subsequently. Thank you to all the audience for turning up. Hopefully we'll see you at the sessions of the rest of this week. And just a quick reminder that the recording for this will be on the BCS member group's YouTube channel. We'll also be sharing the visuals that have been created by Matt and Alex a little bit later once we've got all those polished up and tidied up. But on behalf of everyone, thank you very much, Mark. That's been excellent, very engaging.
Thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Thank you.